Every Friday we get together and get some insights from a current professional so that we can really, hopefully, get a taste of what it's like, what we're getting ourselves into, how we're going to approach this. And today's guest I've heard referred to as one of the architects of the New York sound. And he is sort of one of the key partners to Jay-Z's sound and success. So please give a warm welcome to young Guru.
When I was growing up, hip-hop was not a form of music. It hadn't been born yet. It hadn't been, I guess, recognized by the world as something that was a valid form of music. So everything that we did was us making things up. And my mother would consistently put me in music lessons. I was one of those people that didn't know what instrument they wanted to play, but I just knew I wanted to play music, so I kind of started and tried everything. Piano was the thing that I stayed with the longest, but I pretty much tried everything. I was that, you know, the kid that's like, okay, I didn't make it in band in this, I'm gonna try this, I'm gonna try this. So I pretty much tried everything from saxophones to flutes to drums to guitar, but the piano was the one thing that I kind of stuck with. And then basketball sort of took over my life, but my love for engineering and my love for circuitry was always there. I used to go to Radio Shack and buy the little kit that they have for kids to understand how to build circuits, and I would sit there and build circuits and figure out things, and I would go to, again, this is pre-internet, so you would have to actually go to the library and pick out a book on circuits and read it and try to figure out what they're saying and some of the language. Again, you have to remember I'm like a kid. So some of the language was above my head. I would go research whatever the word meant. When I was supposed to be writing an English paper, I was actually like researching on how to build circuits and like begging my father to buy me some more solder. So, and for me, the biggest thing was like, okay, I don't want to get stuck just DJing parties for the rest of my life. Like, am I going to be, you know, where does that take you? So I found this real small school in Rockville, Maryland called Omega Recording Studios. I couldn't afford Full Sail at the time. Full Sail was, you know, where you would go if you had the money and all this other stuff. And I was just like, I can't afford it. And then in '96, I had my first child. I had a child at 22. I was super young. So I was like, I can't afford Full Sail. I went to Omega, which again, just by luck of the draw, happened to be one of the best moves I could ever make. There were maybe 5, 6 people in my class, in my engineer, and the rest of them were, you know, no disrespect, they were hobbyists. They were kind of like, you know, rich kids whose mom was like, oh, you want to, you know, go do that. And I like walked in with the attitude like, okay, I have a child to feed. I need to know everything that you know. So I went in, I read the book in like a week. I didn't, you know, I just absorbed everything I could, because it's like the light clicks and it's like, this is exactly what I want to do with my life. Because when Pro Tools first came out as an engineering tool, a lot of the older engineers were, you know, they were, for lack of a better word, not impressed. Yeah. You have to remember that this was when it first came out. It was 16-bit, it was slow, it was clunky. The computers were slower, they would crash a lot on you, you know, those type of things. But me forcing myself to learn it got me around New York City so much faster than everyone else. And meeting so many different people and just learning this new thing of recording inside of a computer. Because when I first saw it, my mind just clicked and I was like, oh my God, we don't need tape anymore. This is sort of weird. You know, and you have to remember your mind being completely analog, where we would record music for 6 minutes and then someone would make a song to it. Whereas now, the first time I showed somebody, I was like, okay, after the first 8 bars of your sequence, just stop it. You know, and they're like, what are you doing? I'm like, okay, we can just take this 8 bars and loop it. We don't need to like physically record it for 6 minutes. All this stuff is simple to you guys, but it's like, to us, that was groundbreaking. That was groundbreaking. It was just like, are you serious? You know, or when we first started, you know, recording in the computer, you would record that whole 6 minutes and your session would end up being like a gig, you know? And now I'm recording like 8 bars and my session ends up being like 24 megabytes. And I'm like, this is incredible. I could walk out, you know, with the whole album on a flash drive. Like, when you listen to like a De La Soul's first album, the mixes are horrible. It's the most creative thing you ever want to hear in your life, but the mix is not good, right? So then I heard like Low End Theory where Bob Power did the Tribe Called Quest records. Tribe Called Quest is one of my favorite groups, right? Bob Power got the low end right, to the point where we were like, okay, this is how it's supposed to sound, how the bass and how the drums and all that, but it was still not the clarity on top. It wasn't until Dr. Dre came out with The Chronic that it was like, wow, okay, now someone has it. They have the low part, they have the clarity, and they have the depth. Like Dr. Dre had the depth in the music. Like when you mix records, you can pan left and right, right? You can move instruments left and right. But you can also, with the use of reverb, move instruments this way, like forward and backwards. Like this instrument is supposed to sound like it's 10 feet away from me, or right in my face, or 20 feet away from me. I was mixing those two things. I wanted the clarity of a Dr. Dre record, and I wanted the bottom end of a Tribe Called Quest record, and I was also panning with orchestral things in mind. Like I would visually look at an orchestra and say, okay, these things are here, all for a purpose, and then all the other stuff is in the pit. That's the middle, that's whatever's gonna be panned in the middle. So that's how I would do my records. I was trying to mix these different styles and bring orchestral clarity into it. The interesting thing about hip hop is when it first came out is we had to do what we called, beat digging, or just like searching for beats. So you would hear this incredible drum break and no one told you where it was, no one told you what it was from, or you heard it on the radio and didn't quite catch the end when the guy tells you what all the songs are. And you would just go find these records. That was the start of the journey of listening to all these different forms of music. That was a beautiful thing about hip hop culture, is that we pull music.
You're searching for that moment that
you're probably spending, I would get up, I would go to the normal thing is you'd go find your local record store, you'd find and strike a relationship with the guy. Then after a certain number of weeks of you spending money in there, he'd let you in at maybe 6 in the morning when he first got there before he opens up the store. And I'd turn around and it'd be probably like 8 o'clock at night, and I felt like it was maybe 2 hours. And it's just the whole day, it's just searching through music, listening to music, and you start to connect the dots. You start to say, okay, well, this person played on this album, and then he also produced this album, and then he went to go play with this person. So you start to follow people, you follow labels, you follow producers, arrangers. You start to just get this huge wealth of knowledge that I started to see that my peers who were just into jazz only knew about jazz music, and my peers who were just into rock and roll only knew about rock and roll. So it was like I started to educate my friends on all these different forms of music. So, being that my area ran the gamut from Spanish people to white people to black people to, my friends are multicultural from birth. So just having all of those experiences and all those households that you go into, and then again, if you come into a Jamaican household, you're going to hear, Bob, you're going to hear like the great classics of Jamaica. So it was just a great palette of music for me to listen to, for me to pull from. And then when you start to play music, now you have all these styles in your head and all these ways that you can go. We listened to classical music and just studied arrangement. That was our whole thing. You would pull from all these different musics, like the best thing. Like for me, classical music, my friends would be like, why are you listening to that? And I'm like, do you know how hard it is to write? Like, this guy's sitting there writing that. Like, he doesn't even have an orchestra in front of him. He's just writing that. Like, to be able to do that in your head is incredible. And the arrangement that it takes to do that. Or explaining to some of my other friends when I'm listening to jazz what it is. I don't think they ultimately got it, where I'm trying to tell them, the guys that are on stage, they don't care about us. Like, they're not even playing, they're playing for each other. And they're battling each other. And if you don't get that this guy's battling him during this solo, and he looked at him like, oh, that's what you're gonna do? Okay, great. Then he goes into his solo. It's like, jazz is this whole other world of being able to improv and pull directly from your audience, right then and there. And there's so many different things that I would pull from so many different pieces of music, but just to log all that stuff in your head, and that would be what I would sample. That would be the things that I would try to recreate. You have these guys that are now setting up outside and playing in the Jamaican tradition of toasting. And in Jamaica, what would happen is a guy would cut a record, there'd be a sound system, and then when we say it's on air, it literally was on air. Like, they would get on a truck and ride around Jamaica and play this new record that they just created, and they'd be announcing that they're having a party at so-and-so, whatever spot, And that's how everything happened. So we had a guy by the name of Kool Herc, who was a direct immigrant from Jamaica, come to New York City. And he brought that style of going outside, playing these records loud, but his style was sort of playing the record, and he would do what we call needle dropping, where you would play this one record, and when that drum break was over, you'd pick it up and drop it right back, and if you were good, you could drop it on beat. You know, that was the whole thing.
They're reading grooves, they could actually see what...
You can feel and see where the groove is going to start, sort of on the record. You get to that point of being able to, you watched vinyl for so long. Now we have this guy named Afrika Bambaataa who comes along, who combines all of the things that were going on in the Bronx at the time. The Bronx at the time, you know, let's be real, was one of the worst places on earth, right? A lot of burnt down buildings, a lot of heroin everywhere, right? So this guy, Afrika Bambaataa, brings together all the gangs, and he brings it all as one culture and calls it hip-hop. Right? So this brings in the graffiti artists, this brings in the DJs, this brings in the MCs, or who we used to call the toasters at the time, and also the B-boys. That was the dance expression of what it was. And at that moment, the MC was the least important person. He was sort of the DJ's tag-along friend. Who,
DJ was the center.
The guy who was actually DJing was the most important person. So you wouldn't come to see the guy on the microphone. You came to see the DJ, and the DJ would hand the microphone to his friend and then say, go tell the people how great I am, right? So the first guy would make rhymes about whoever was DJing, and that's, you know, he was known as part of that guy's set. So then as MCs start to get to a little bit of prominence, or, you know, he's doing this in front of a room of a whole bunch of girls, he's gonna say, oh, well, you know, I'm pretty awesome too. You know, like the rhyme is gonna include some of that. So they kind of got to the point where the MC started to become the forefront because he had this, he had the vocal power, he had the microphone. But it all started off of DJs. DJs were the centerpiece, they were the epicenter of whatever was going on, and they ran the scene.
What my idea was when we were approached by III was, number one, to make a pair of headphones that allows you to mix records wherever you are. If we look at a lot of people in this room, you know, people just in general are now making records in their bedroom, which is not a sonically treated room, you know, and most of the time, most people's bedrooms are square, which is the worst environment that you can be in. A perfect square creates what we call standing waves, where, you know, a wave bounces off a wall and constantly just keeps hitting each other, i.e. in layman's terms, your room, what you hear in your room is not actually what's going on. Something is being added or taken away. What I wanted to do was make a pair of headphones that were as flat as possible, sort of opposite of what the other people out there in the genre of headphones have done, because there's a purpose. Like, you know, you put on the Dr. Dre's and it's like, okay, it has an EQ curve on it, sounds great. No matter what you play through it, it's gonna sound great, right? That's the purpose of that headphone. My headphones are so that you can mix. If you just put your mix into a pair of headphones and they sound great already, you're not understanding what you're hearing. So that was my whole reasoning, was to create a pair of headphones so that you can sit in your bedroom and have an accurate listening environment. And it took a lot of work. It was a lot of drivers, a lot of testing, a lot of different, like, I'm an audio guy, but then having to get into, well, is it going to be mesh? Is it going to be leather? What's this material? What's that material? This goes to this. Like, designing a pair of headphones, I didn't know was so much in, like, almost like fashion. It's weird, but. Right, and there's a dance scene where where he's switching the colors on people. That's what popular culture does. Somebody goes, yo, the new color's green, right? And then everybody the people have on transparent clothing so that whatever color comes on the thing, they all are in that color, right? That's what we do. We change and say, yo, you know what? The new color's gold. The new color's red. That's all it is. Take off the Jay-Z's the main one that was like, okay, put on a jersey. And then you go to like these events and the whole audience looks like the starting five from like a 1980s basketball team. It's not special anymore. So you gotta change that, right? DOA, Death or Auto-Tune was just like, stop, like this, just stop using it. This is corny. You guys can't sing. It's ruining our music, and just cut it out. So you have to have the ability to like direct where you want people to go, and the heart to be able to do that. And you know, that's why he has that line in there. This is going to offend, you know, a couple of my political connects. Like,
some of the people that I love really, meaning Kanye, like really use this thing, but it's corny now. Like, stop it. You know, that's we have to be self-correcting if we expect our genre to last and to be respect. I want my genre to be respected the same way as everybody else's genre. You know, and that's
when I was in college, we used to throw parties. I would take $50 for DJing the party, maybe 50, maybe sometimes I'd take nothing, and we would take all of that money that we would make. We make thousands of dollars in a night, and all that would be studio money. As a crew, we'd have to figure out a way to pay for studio. You know, you guys have a studio in your room. If I could make records in my room, and oh my God, I would be like Master P's catalog. Like, it was just like the immense amount of music that we used to make, but it's all on 4-track cassettes because we didn't have a studio to go to. You guys have like pristine digital studios in your room. Take advantage of it. Like, make the music, put it out, let your friends critique it, put it on SoundCloud, let people call it crap. Like, don't get mad when they do that. Play your music for a bunch of people that don't know you, right? Take it outside of your friends. Your friends are gonna go, oh, that's cool. They see your struggle. They see how hard you're working at it. The general public could care less about how long it took you, whatever. Get honest opinions about your music and don't like take that and go cry and go, oh, they didn't like my music. Figure out what they didn't like and make something that people like, but go do it now before there's this weird thing about life that like once you graduate and you start to have kids and you have bills and all these real life situations, it gets in the way of music. Right now it's very easy for 4 of you guys to go, oh, let's go make a song. Like 10 years from now, you're gonna know these same 4 people and she's gonna go, you know what? My daughter gets out of dance recital at 3, so I can't be there until about 5. She's gonna go, well, you know what? My job has me going on a retreat for the next week. And like, it gets harder and harder and harder to make music together. Do it now. Do it now.
I feel like we just got started. Young Guru. If I could ask for a nice round of applause for I.